members, now we have our transportation and operations update, and we're going to have Ms. Kimberly Jones, our Executive Director of Student Transportation, to kick that off. No, board members, that we know how important it is that we address the challenges we've had with transporting our diverse learners. So I'll let Ms. Jones give us an update, and then I'll just say a few comments after that.
Thank you, CEO Martinez, and good afternoon, board members. What this chart reflects is our total population of students who qualify for student transportation services, which is approximately 16,000. Of that, 12,470 are receiving services today. We currently have 3,800 students that are without services, with 2,300 being diverse learners. 97% of those students are attending school today. Next slide. Transportation continues to move full speed ahead with our recruitment efforts, leaving no stone unturned with our efforts to provide transportation to our students to get to and from school. We continue to work with schools to stabilize the financial assistance by cross-referencing data from the schools against our records. The first 3 batch of checks hit the schools already, with the 4th in process. We've already began to use alternative modes of transportation, starting with taxi cabs. We implemented North Star taxi cabs to transport students last week. October 20th is when it began. We have 2 new vendors that will begin transporting students next week, the week of November 1st, which is Fiat Yellow Bus and Alla Green Paratransit. We have an additional transportation company, Ride Along, who's fully executed. They will begin transporting the 2nd week of November, and we're projecting to provide 80 drivers by the end of November. We've also implemented a driver incentive bonus and retention payment to assist vendors with hiring new drivers and retaining existing drivers. Next slide, please. The non-attendance sheet reflects that 3%. So I stated early on that 97% of the students were attending school. We flagged that 107 students were in non-attendance. Of that 107, 96 of those students were diverse learners and 11 were general education students. Once we broke that down a little bit further, we have identified that 51 students were active and 56 were non-active. The 56 non-active students were coded with various codes, such as non-public. They transferred outside the Chicago district, transferred to homeschooling, guardian voluntarily withdrawal, graduated from CPS, and did not arrive. The 50 diverse learners that are active, we've routed 32 of those students, with the remaining 18 will be routed by October 29th, which will leave us with all diverse learners for the non-attendance to be routed. We will also move forward with routing that one Gen Ed, general education student. So out of the 107, all students will be routed, aside of that 56 that were deemed inactive. And that concludes my transportation update. And I'll take questions from here.
Board members, before we go to custodial. So the game changer for us has really been the execution of the contract for Ride Along. That contract alone allows us to add 80 drivers during the month of November. The goal is to add up to 300 drivers and this will be an ambitious goal, but to get them added during the month of December. If we get to that point, and this is one of the challenges for us, is just helping Ride Along so that they can understand how to route, how to pair the routes, so that they do not just one pickup, but they do multiple pickups in the morning, multiple drop-offs in the afternoon. And so for us, if we can accomplish that, our goal right now would be that all of our diverse learners could be serviced by the time we come back from Christmas break. And with that, it's not an all or none, it's ramping up all the way along. So we're going to be, and Kim is already doing this, but we're monitoring this on a weekly basis. So before we had the Ride Along execution, it was just a very slow process. And I will tell you, it's frustrating for all of us. It's frustrating for our parents. We have made sure that any child that wasn't attending school, that they were prioritized. And as you can see, we've taken care of that. And it was 3% of our students, and the ones that are still active, they are now routed for service. But of course, that's not enough. And so for us, getting all of the other students that right now might be receiving, by the way, stipends, they might have, they found other ways to get to school. but we want to make sure we're fulfilling our obligation of providing the service that we owe them. And so the ride along for us is going to be our clearest avenue. So board members, I will continue to give you updates as we ramp up, so that I will be able to share with you, especially as we get into December, how realistic is the 300 drivers? Do we need to do alternative plans? Because I've heard it loud and clear, board members, we need to make sure that diverse learners are served.
Member Todd Breland.
Okay. Sorry, I wasn't quite ready to ask a question yet, but I will. Can you, going back, first of all, I want to thank Kim and her team, and the whole transportation unit on how hard they've been working to find drivers, right? Like, we know that this is a national problem. It's not just in Chicago, and they have clearly been shaking the bushes to try to find whoever they can. I have some questions about ride along, and I was wondering if we could first understand sort of like where this vendor came from. We found them, which it seems like a good thing, but how are they able to find drivers when none of the other partners have been able to in our context?
Kim, can you answer that, please?
So I've been working with, speaking with Ride Along for the past couple of months. And I too had the same question, board member. And he did state that because they are a global transportation company, that they were flexible with transferring drivers within different cities. And I mean, his exact words were, they were fortunate enough to be able to assist in this trying times with transportation demands. So he didn't go into details of how he was able to secure, as many drivers, but he seemed to be operating in good faith, and he wants to assist the students of Chicago Public Schools.
Okay. And so with this 300 drivers, how many total students will those 300 drivers be able to serve?
Approximately 3,600.
So 3,600 will cover plus some, the 2,300 plus diverse learners who currently do not have transportation, but are somehow getting to school, whether that be by financial compensation or other ways that they're patching things together, or all of them will be by 1029. Is that correct?
You are correct.
Okay, because, and to your point, CEO Martinez, I think my concern is this, right? If we look at the chart that you gave us here, and we see the total universe of students who we're providing transportation to, there are two subgroups of those students who we are required by law to provide transportation to. Well, and almost three, right? So by the federal government, students with disabilities and students in temporary living situations, right? In order to access a free and appropriate public education. And the primacy there is the federal, right? Then at the state level, there seems to be some state law that also requires providing access to transportation for low-income students to open enrollment schools, which is part of why this falls into the selective enrollment and magnet conversation. But I guess a data point I would like to still understand better and be able to share publicly as well is, of the total students who we're currently providing transportation to, how many are both not diverse learners and not low income, right? Because that's a pool of people for whom we are currently not obligated by any law to provide transportation to, but we are. And at some point, and I guess maybe this is a broader question, how will we know, and maybe it's when you check back in with us in November or December, when it is that we need to pivot to shift the current provision of transportation to this group who we are not required to, in order to make sure we're providing it to the students who we are?
Yeah, so a couple of points on that, board member. So I hear your urgency. I have it as well. So we definitely are going to be monitoring this week to week. Kim is monitoring it day for day, just so you know. And I've seen great progress. I was literally hour by hour looking for a text of when the contract was going to be executed, because I knew this was going to be the game changer. So I would ask, allow us to implement this, work with the vendor. We'll know by the end of November if it's not gonna work. Okay. And so we'll be able to pivot. The challenge I would share with you about rerouting services, unfortunately, it's not as simple as we all would like it to be. Where Pedro can be taken off a bus and I can add Maurice. the routes are complicated because it's based on where the children live.
Mhm.
And so it doesn't always equal 1-to-1.
Mhm.
And so for us, we'd rather avoid that if we can, because that way, and what's great about the way we're leveraging the services, and I would just put this as a thought for the board, I actually see this as an opportunity. If we can be successful in executing these different alternative services, the question that I actually have now for next year is what is the right balance of these different services? And we'll look at the cost as well, so make sure they're cost efficient. Because I do worry that when we just rely on buses, not only do you have the risk of bus drivers, but there are times when you can have a very small number of children on one route in a big bus, and that's not efficient either. So I actually feel that we're gonna take this, frankly, this challenge we have as an opportunity where I'm gonna come back to the board and say, let's reimagine transportation, leveraging these different services. But to your point, board member, have the safeguards for all children that are required by law, that we have to get them routed first. And then we'll work. Now that will mean, board members, that we do have to look at our policies, because we do, by policy, in the policy say we're going to provide this service. And so as a parent myself, if that's in policy, I think there's also, there's a sense of obligation, I feel, as well. But my goal right now is to make sure you're well informed and that we make progress. And the goal right now that is to make sure we have all of our diverse learners. And right now our goal is that we can ramp up to the drivers, and we're working with the vendor, do it no later than by the time we come back from Christmas break, as it's ramping up. So again, not an all or none, but it's ramping up all the way along.
Thank you. And I appreciate the comment about the difficulty in routing. I understand that, which is part of why I asked the question of what is the actual universe of students who don't fall into either of those categories.
We'll get that for you.
Yeah, and to your point on the policy too, I agree, like for the long term, we have to revisit the policy. But in the short term, I think both federal law and probably the state law trump our board policies. So I think that's also part of where my questioning is coming.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'd like to add, in addition to those two categories that are addressed by federal law and state law, and this is an issue that I attempted to address decades ago as a legislator. We have families with kids in selective enrollment schools that rely on transportation. And that are concerned about the safety of their children. They don't want their kids, because of the route, the CTA route involved, they do not want their kids on a CTA bus for safety reasons. And so while they're not a formal category, it's something that we also want to consider. As if we're forced to have to make decisions regarding the distribution of those resources. Yes.
I have a question that, first I want to acknowledge all the hard work that has gone in addressing this issue. It is very complicated, as noted by CEO Martinez and others in their comments. But my question, I don't know if it really goes here. What I was concerned when I heard that by 1029, all the 50 remainder diverse learners will be rerouted, those that were in non-attendance. And I just, if possible, if there somebody can comment on what is being done for those students that, if I understand correctly, have been out from school since August 30th, and it's now almost the end of October. And I'm sure they'll have very particular needs that need to be addressed right away.
Yeah, but what I can tell you, board member, because I have been very worried about those children not attending school. Many of them are being homeschooled. And we've been in constant contact with the parents. So the good news is we've always had the personal connection with the families to know what the children are getting. And knowing our schools, they're doing what they can, whether it's providing assignments or work, but of course it's not enough. And so that's why we said we need to get these children all on board. And there was one magnet student, and I apologize, board member, but, I said, I can't leave that student out there because that student wasn't attending school either. I said, let's get them all routed. And so by next week, we already had more than half of them routed as we speak. By the 29th, which is within the next 2 days, all will be routed. And then, like I said, as we're building up our capacity, we're right along, we start really making significant dent and really bringing in our diverse learners all the way up. And as you noted, once we get to 300 drivers, we're even making dents in the magnet children as well. I
Thank
think to
you.
your point, we'll look at priorities within that group as well as you also mentioned.
Yeah, and I appreciate, and I agree with you that this is probably an opportunity to look at our transportation policies and make adjustments if needed. I just, I worry about diverse learners whose needs may not be fully met by homeschooling because of their special needs.
Yeah.
Precisely. But thank you. I end my comment by saying that I appreciate the tremendous complexity of this issue and all the work and goodwill that has been invested in